One of the most famous ogres in movie history almost had a completely different voice. A comedian recorded 85% of his lines before everything changed, and the studio had to start completely over from scratch. We're getting to that one, and it's not even the strangest voice casting story on this list. Welcome back to the Throwback Network, where we dig up the casting stories Hollywood would rather you forget. A Simpsons kid on this list almost played the wrong sibling entirely. A Toy Story hero here was turned down by a comedian who didn't think his own voice fit the role. And a Disney villain nearly lost her signature part because her own agent never even read her the script. 10 cartoon characters, 10 voices we almost never got to hear, and every single one of these stories is stranger than anything the writers could have made up. Let's start at number 10. Number 10, Blossom, the Powerpuff Girls, 1992 to 1998. Before Kathy Cavadini became the voice of Blossom in 1998, the character already existed. Creator Craig McCracken made a short film back in 1992 called The Whoop-Ass Girls, a rough, scrappy prototype that would eventually turn into the Powerpuff Girls once Cartoon Network picked it up. Cavadini wasn't behind Blossom's voice in that original short at all. The role belonged to a different actress named Jennifer Freed, and by the time the show got greenlit as a series 6 years later, the part had been recast completely. Cavadini stepped in and ended up defining the character for the next several decades of reruns, movies, and spin-offs, straight through the original 1998 to 2005 run, later specials, and multiple TV movies. Cavadini kept voicing Blossom, and she became so identified with the role that when Cartoon Network rebooted the franchise in 2016 with an entirely new voice cast, longtime fans treated it as a genuine loss. What almost none of them ever knew is that a version of Blossom existed before Cavadini too, sitting quietly at the very start of the franchise's history. It's easy to forget that a character this established once existed in a completely different form, voiced by someone whose name most fans have never even heard. Number 9, Fred Flintstone, 1959 to 1960. Before there was a Flintstones, there was a pilot called The Flagstones. Hanna-Barbera shot it in 1959 to sell networks on the idea of a primetime cartoon sitcom built around a modern Stone Age family. And the actor who'd go on to say Yabba Dabba Doo for the next 4 decades wasn't the one voicing Fred in that pilot. Daws Butler voiced the pilot's Fred, and he wasn't some unknown either. Butler was one of the most prolific voice actors in animation history, the guy who'd go on to voice Yogi Bear, Huckleberry Hound, and dozens of other Hanna-Barbera characters. According to Alan Reed's own son, Butler had plenty of talent, but he just didn't land the specific gruff, warm growl the producers had in mind for Fred. So when the show got its full series order and became The Flintstones, the role went to Alan Reed instead, and that's the voice that carried the show for its entire 6-season run, right up until Reed's death in 1977. Butler didn't walk away empty-handed. He spent the next 2 decades becoming one of the defining voices of the entire Hanna-Barbera catalog, which makes it even stranger that the role everyone remembers him missing is the one that turned into a household name. The most famous caveman on television almost sounded like a completely different guy. Number 8. SpongeBob SquarePants, 1999. Creator Steven Hillenburg knew exactly who he wanted the moment he heard it. He'd heard Tom Kenny voice a minor character on Nickelodeon's Rocko's Modern Life, and that one performance convinced him so completely that he told network executives he didn't want anyone else to even audition. Nickelodeon insisted on holding auditions anyway, which was standard practice for a new show carrying that kind of budget. Voice actor Jess Harnell, who'd go on to become a familiar name from Animaniacs, came in and read for the part. According to Harnell, it came down to the wire before Kenny ultimately got the role, and at the time, he privately wondered how long a show about a talking sponge could possibly last anyway. May of 1999 is when SpongeBob SquarePants premiered on Nickelodeon, and Kenny has voiced the character in every episode since, along with the movies that followed. Harnell, for his part, has talked about the almost role with a good sense of humor, joking that he clearly underestimated exactly how long that talking sponge was going to stick around. Even the man who created SpongeBob couldn't stop the network from almost handing the part to somebody else. Number 7, Belle, Beauty and the Beast, 1991. After Jodie Benson's success as the singing and speaking voice of Ariel in The Little Mermaid, Disney brought her back to read for their next princess. This time it was Belle, the bookish heroine of Beauty and the Beast. It came down to just her and Paige O'Hara, according to Benson's own account in later interviews. The night before the final decision, she actually called O'Hara to talk it through. Songwriter Howard Ashman eventually told Benson that Disney wanted different actresses attached to different princesses, since audiences already connected her voice specifically to Ariel, and the part went to O'Hara. Benson has said since that she was genuinely thrilled for her. Released in 1991, Beauty and the Beast went on to become the first animated film ever nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. And O'Hara has voiced Belle in nearly every piece of Disney media featuring the character ever since. What could have been an awkward rivalry turned into something else entirely. Benson and O'Hara have stayed close over the decades, regularly appearing together at Disney fan conventions as two of the studio's most recognizable princess voices, the almost casting now just a story they tell together. The first Disney princess of the 1990s almost sounded exactly like the one who came right before her. Number 6. Mufasa, The Lion King, 1994. James Earl Jones brought a voice so commanding to Mufasa that it's genuinely hard to picture anyone else in the role, but before Jones signed on, the production reportedly floated some enormous names for the part of Simba's father. Liam Neeson, Sean Connery, and Timothy Dalton were all reportedly in the mix at various points, according to widely repeated production accounts. None of that comes confirmed directly from the filmmakers, so this one is worth treating as production lore rather than settled fact, though it's persistent enough and specific enough that it earns a spot on this list. What is certain is that Jones ended up delivering one of the most quoted lines in Disney history, and once you've heard him say it, no other voice really fits. Picture James Bond delivering the Circle of Life speech instead, and suddenly it makes sense why Disney went a different direction. If you're new here, we dig up stories like this every week. The casting decisions and behind-the-scenes near misses, hiding behind characters you already thought you knew inside and out. Hit subscribe if that's your kind of thing, because the next 4 entries only get more dramatic from here. Number 5. Ursula, The Little Mermaid, 1989. Disney's first choice to voice the villainous sea witch Ursula wasn't a voice actor at all. B. Arthur, the star of Maude and later Golden Girls, got the call, known for a deep, commanding voice that fit the character on paper perfectly. Here's where it gets strange. The script reportedly described Ursula's voice as having a B. Arthur quality, meant as a compliment and a shorthand for casting. But the pitch apparently got lost entirely in translation once it made its way to Arthur's agent. Reading the description as an insult rather than a casting note, the agent never even passed the offer along to Arthur herself. Pat Carroll got the role instead, and she turned Ursula into one of the most menacing villains in the entire Disney catalog. All because of a mixed signal between an agent and a script. One of the most iconic villain performances in animation almost never happened at all. Number 4. Scar, The Lion King, 1994. Jeremy Irons ultimately gave one of animation's most chilling villain performances as Scar, but he wasn't the only actor circling the role before the part got locked in. Tim Curry has said publicly that playing Scar would have been nice, confirming he was genuinely in the running. Scheduling ultimately worked against Curry, who was reportedly considered alongside other big names floated for the part, including James Caan, Robert Duvall, Ray Liotta, and Malcolm McDowell. At one point, there was even talk of Curry voicing a menacing rock python meant to serve as one of Scar's henchmen, a character that got cut from the film entirely once Irons came aboard and the story tightened up around him. The most theatrical villain voice actor of his generation almost played the most theatrical villain in Disney's entire catalog, and somehow it never quite came together. Number 3. Buzz Lightyear, Toy Story, 1995. Before Tim Allen brought Buzz Lightyear to life, Pixar's first choice for the Space Ranger was comedian Billy Crystal. Crystal turned the role down because he genuinely didn't think his voice fit the character, and he's called it the single biggest regret of his career ever since. The schmuck who turned down Toy Story is how Crystal has jokingly described himself in public, and director John Lasseter later revealed something remarkable. He'd actually taken dialogue from When Harry Met Sally and worked it into a Toy Story test reel just to show what Crystal's version of the character could have sounded like. Crystal himself has referred to it as essentially Buzz Lightyear delivering lines from a completely different movie. The first entirely computer-animated feature film ever released hit theaters in November of 1995. And Tim Allen's take on Buzz, equal parts self-important and secretly insecure, became one of the defining performances of the whole franchise. Crystal did eventually work with Pixar years later, voicing Mike Wazowski in Monsters, Incorporated, but he still said outright that passing on Buzz Lightyear remains the one decision in his career he'd take back. One of the most quotable Space Rangers in movie history exists because the guy who turned it down didn't think he was funny enough for the part. Number 2. Bart and Lisa Simpson, 1987. When Nancy Cartwright and Yeardley Smith first auditioned for the Tracy Ullman Show shorts that would eventually spin off into The Simpsons, they were both reading for the opposite characters they'd end up playing for the next several decades. Bart is who Smith set out to audition for specifically, but casting felt her natural voice ran too high for the part, so she got offered Lisa instead. Cartwright, meanwhile, had actually read for Lisa, and she ended up with Bart. The swap gave American television two of its most recognizable animated voices, just not the ones either actress originally walked into the room expecting to play. Since those Tracy Ullman Show shorts in 1987, through The Simpsons' full-length series premiere in 1989 and every season that followed, both actresses have voiced their characters continuously. Smith has said in later interviews that she's completely at peace with how it turned out, and honestly, it's hard to imagine Cartwright's raspy, mischievous energy coming out of Lisa, or Smith's higher, more earnest voice carrying Bart's catchphrases for 30-plus years. The kid who's been driving America crazy for over 3 decades almost had his sister's voice instead, literally. Number 1. Shrek, 1997 to 2001. Chris Farley was cast as the original voice of Shrek, and writers built the entire dynamic between Shrek and Donkey around Farley's real-life friendship with fellow SNL star David Spade. Right in the middle of production, in 1997, Farley recorded roughly 85% of his lines before he passed away. Close to a year is how long the studio spent afterward just figuring out how to move forward at all. When Mike Myers eventually came on board, he asked for a complete rewrite of the character. Farley's version had leaned more humble and bumbling, a gentler take on the ogre, but Myers pushed the character older, more jaded, and distinctly Scottish, closer to the Shrek audiences know today. Years later, leaked audio from Farley's original sessions surfaced online, giving fans a haunting glimpse of the movie that almost was. Reaching theaters in May of 2001, Shrek went on to win the very first Academy Award ever given out for Best Animated Feature, a category the Oscars had just created that same year. Myers stayed with the role through 3 sequels and a spin-off. Farley never got to see any of it, and the friendship that shaped the entire buddy dynamic between Shrek and Donkey belonged to 2 SNL castmates who never got the chance to finish the movie together. The most famous ogre in movie history is only the version we know because of a tragedy nobody saw coming. Conclusion. 10 characters, 10 voices, we came within one casting decision of never hearing it all, whether that meant a network insisting on an audition nobody wanted, an agent who never passed along the right message, or a loss nobody could have planned for. Notice what actually connects these stories. Sometimes a creator knew exactly who they wanted, and the system made them prove it anyway. Sometimes a huge star turned a role down and spent the rest of their career regretting it. And sometimes the switch happened because of a tragedy, with the character that came out the other side ending up completely different from what anyone originally set out to make. None of these characters became icons by accident. Every single one of them got there by the narrowest possible margin. If one of these surprised you, or if you've got a favorite voice casting story we didn't cover here, drop a comment and let us know. And if there's a cartoon character out there who was almost voiced by somebody else and we missed it, tell us below, because we're always looking for the next one. Thanks for watching. This is the Throwback Network, and I'll see you in the next one.